It's time. Welcome to Daylight Savings Time, and welcome to a muddy Tuesday. What we will be doing in our class is finishing up the 19th century this week, which means we have a test next week. So what I'll have this week is Thursday, I'll post one of those short one question extra credit quizzes, and that'll be that. And then we'll do a test next week. I really enjoyed your essays, a lot of real good original ones. Ones that were problematic were ones that you just write one whole paragraph and don't break into sections, or you had too many you had too many topics. Like you would talk about social media, and when you talk about social media, that includes Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and all of these things, and they're all kind of different, so it gets kind of mushy. And then you talk about several different unintended consequences: cyberbullying, social isolation, internet addiction, all of those things. Whereas this is a short essay. You only need one, not each one of those is an essay unto itself, and you're covering way too much territory and therefore not as much depth. So those are the issues. We will start today's stuff. We'll finish up the 19th century this week. And we have stuff. Right, Juniper? Right. She says it's good, but she wants to go take a rest and dry off. Anyway, we talked about the Civil War and how the Union was able to use the telegraph to coordinate troop movements, observe all sorts of things that the South was doing, and how the Gettysburg Address looked crappy in person, but looked great in the media. So those are the kind of things that's really taking off. After the war, we're starting some really important new technologies. And not from start. First one is the phonograph.
Thomas Edison was born in Millen, Ohio on February 11, 1847. He didn't learn to talk until he was almost 4 years old. In school, he often daydreamed and was labeled as mentally slow by his teacher. Because of these comments, young Edison's mother took him out of school and homeschooled him. In 1854, his family moved to Port Huron, Michigan. Edison sold candy and newspapers on trains. He became a telegraph operator after saving the daughter of a station agent from an oncoming train. He moved to Louisville, Kentucky in 1866 and became an employee of Western Union. Starting in 1872, Edison worked on the quadruplex telegraph system. It allowed telegraphs to send and receive 4 signals at the same time on the same wire. Edison's system wasn't a new invention, but an improvement on the duplex system created by Moses G. Farmer and Joseph Stearns. Edison's first invention was a phonograph in 1877. Many people today incorrectly associate the phonograph with a record player. Edison's device recorded sound on the cylinders and was geared as a recorder for the voice, not for recording and playing back music. It was the gramophone that recorded to discs.
Okay, see, he had the idea. We remember Edison, that was his first big invention, but it was Emil Berliner who came up with the disc that really made a difference. We'll talk a little about that in a minute. But the phonograph started a new industry, the recording industry. People started making records. You didn't have to have live music anymore. It really changed the way people use the media.
And became the record player that we know today. Edison did not invent the first electric light bulb. He invented the first commercially practical incandescent.
There you go. He made the first usable light bulb. And as we remember, the light bulb was needed because people were working nights because of the telegraph. All of these things are
Edison
interconnected.
light. Edison bought the patent on what was probably the first invented light bulb. Later, he came across Joseph Wilson Swan, who had developed and patented a working light bulb. Edison made Swan a partner and eventually bought him and his patent out, giving him full ownership of the patent. Edison patented a system for electrical distribution in 1880 in order to capitalize on his electric lamps. Edison
There we go. The big thing he invented was the power grid and the electric company.
used direct current to power his system, which had its limitations. And when these limitations were made public, Edison launched a propaganda campaign to convince people of the superiority of direct current. This war of the currents, as it was called, brought in the involvement of Nikola Tesla, an inventor and rival of Edison who had created the alternating current power generator. Alternating current eventually proved to be a better system of transmission.
There was a movie about Edison and Tesla last year. But anyway. And then, so he was all over the place. And again, as we've seen again and again, patents become a big deal.
Step 1, open the BetMGM Sportsbook. Step 2, get in on the action.
The music industry as we know it today is a mere 100 years old. Its emergence and rise to power was all thanks to a little piece of metal called the acoustic horn. The inventor Thomas Edison was the first to successfully reproduce his voice in 1877 with his speaking machine, and thus ushered in the era of the phonogram. Hello, my dear polyphonic friends of harmony and sound. Welcome to It's History. I'm Brett, and today I want to explore in this series the wonderful world of sound recording. It all starts once again with Mr. Thomas Alva Edison. Now, when you hear the name Edison, people immediately think of the light bulb, one can say. And yes, that is exactly what we said in our last episode when we covered the history of that wonderful little invention. But there are many who do not know of the countless other inventions that spawned from the efforts of this industrious, self-educated American. This guy had his fingers in everything, among them the invention of sound recording. This is, of course, not to say that Edison was the only one to come up with the idea. Far from it. The desire to preserve one's own voice, whether through vanity or other reasons, is very old. There are documented attempts of people trying to do just this, which goes far back as the 10th century. So Edison was, in this respect, only faster than everyone else. Or, as he would say himself, I am more than a sponge than an inventor. I absorb ideas from every source. My principal business is giving commercial value to the brilliant but misdirected ideas of others. Thomas Edison created for himself a think tank in Menlo Park in New York. And with the idea of a speaking machine fresh in his mind, he gave a crude sketch of the device to his collaborator, John Cruzy, a Swiss immigrant, who later built the device that would, on the 21st of November, 1877, become the world's first voice recorder, which he named the phonograph. Edison's sketch presented Mr. Cruzy with a picture of tinfoil wrapped around a metal roll, much like the foil wrapped around chocolate Easter bunny eggs, that could be turned with the hand crank. Using an acoustic horn, the sound's vibrations would then become pressed against a membrane that would start to vibrate. This membrane was fitted to a steel needle that would carve the vibrations into the tinfoil as it turned. Edison's speaking machine was presented to a wider audience on the 6th of December, 1877, and boy, was everyone excited. Edison leaned over the flaring horn and spoke the following words of wisdom.
Hello, 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 Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere where Mary went, that lamb was sure to go. Ha, 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 ha.
It was now realized. He was the first man to hear his own voice speak back to him from a recording. The patent was filed on December 24th, and 1887 saw the first commercial production of the speaking machine. The main customers were mostly showmen who presented the device at fairs. This speaking machine caused a flurry of excitement at first, but then fizzled away quickly, and for good reason. Poor sound quality, and with no more than a minute to record, requiring frequent replacement of the cylinders. Disappointed by poor sales of his speaking machine that he later named the phonograph, Edison gave up his pursuit in voice recording and spent the next 10 years devoting himself to other inventions. But during this time, another inventor took on the task and, based on Edison's principles, revolutionized the technique of sound recording. Developed by Emil Berliner, a German from Hanover who immigrated to America, his device quickly became very popular and virtually set up the foundation for the record. On the 26th of December, 1887, Berliner patented his device that would record sound into discs. He called it a gramophone. Edison noticed a renewed interest along with improvements that were made in the sound recording technology, and up to 1890 attempted to upgrade his phonograph, but it still could not compete with the record. The key component to Berliner's innovation was that, unlike Edison, who recorded sound on a cylinder, Berliner recorded sound vibrations on a disc. On May 16th, 1888, about 6 months after Edison's invention, Berliner presented his device to the public for the first time to an expert panel on the Franklin Institute of Philadelphia. Berliner also used the horn, membrane, and needle method to record. However, he also invented another kind of sound recording technique. He didn't carve the sound waves vertically onto a cylinder like Edison, but instead recorded the sound from left to right using horizontal modulation of the needle as it traced its line along the rotating disc with a thin coating of soot. Berliner's method improved sound quality considerably. Directly after the recording process, the soot was varnished and then used to photo engrave its equivalent grooves onto a metal disc. The discs had an average diameter of 25 to 30 centimeters and could be played at a speed of 78 RPMs. However, a major drawback emerged from Berliner's method. The disc could only be used to play sounds once they were recorded and could not be used to record from again, since the grooves of the disc projected inward. Thus, the records could only be made one at a time, which the artist found to be unacceptable as they were forced to play the same song over and over again. Berliner continued to experiment and came up with a solution in 1895. He replaced the black layer of carbon with a massive sheet of wax, which he then electroplated, resulted in a negative record with grooves projecting outward and not inward that he could use to stamp positive copies with. Electroplating is a physical process which goes all the way back to the Italian physicist Luigi Galvani that uses electric current to change the surface properties of an object. With this process, copper plates could finally be reproduced at will. For these copper plates, Berliner used a material composed of around 70% stone dust and 30% shellac, resulting in the so-called shellac discs. On the subject of shellac, for those like me who never heard of it before, it's a resin secreted from the female lac insect. Now, this parasite has its home in Burma, India, and Thailand and loves to feed on the sap of lacquer trees. Now, these sophisticated bugs protect their eggs by covering the branches with a 3 to 10 millimeter thick layer full of shellac, just so you know. It required a Hungarian physicist who immigrated to America named Peter Karl Goldmark to turn the record into the LP that we know today. Now, Goldmark developed a record made of plastic vinyl that could be recorded on both sides. Now, he presented his development on the 21st of June, 1948 at a distributor meeting in Atlantic City, which he patented under the name LP, standing for Long Playing Record. For those of you who love figures, Goldmark's record had a diameter of 30 centimeters and were set at 33 1/3 revolutions per minute, boasting up.
And I remember the days when that's what music was recorded on. So that really brings us up to the modern era. Yes, Edison started, but it wasn't until Berliner made it practical that the industry really took off. And I'll ask you, effects. New jobs, culture. You hear new music from different countries, including the American South. It's the starting of hearing of jazz music, which is African American music. Then we have the next big one, the telephone.
Live TV from 85 plus channels with local sports and news. YouTube TV.
I'm
Try
the
it
same
free.
guy again, but he does a
See your
good job.
potential retirement income in 30 seconds. Guaranteed monthly income for life.
Das Pferd frisst keinen Gurkensalat, translated as the horse does not eat cucumber salad. These are the most famous words in connection with a unique invention that has become indispensable in our daily lives. What was first dismissed as a pointless toy, its potential was quickly recognized by some clever minds. This invention is responsible for the largest patent dispute in history. We are talking about the telephone. Hello, my dear friends of encrypted communication. I'm Brett, and a very big welcome to another episode of It's History. Now, every country has its telephone inventor. The French have Charles Bousseau, who in 1854 described a telephone but never built the thing. The Italians have their theater technician and candlestick maker, Antonio Meucci, who in 1871 drew up a blueprint for a phone, but it never became anything more. And then there's the good old American Elisha Gray, who turned in his patent just a little bit too late. Nonetheless, the invention of the telephone has become closely associated with two other names: Alexander Graham Bell, the one who everyone knows, and Johann Philipp Reis, the name who maybe only a few of you know. Two super intelligent people whose biographies could not be any more different. One was a son of a professor of rhetoric, and at the age of 10 entered a private school in Edinburgh, Scotland. Later, he would come to study Latin and Greek. By the age of 17, Alexander Graham Bell became a teacher of elocution and music in Elgin, also in Scotland. The other was the son of a baker and became an orphan by the age of 10. By the virtue of his circumstances, he could not find himself anything more than a commercial apprenticeship. However, Johann Philipp Reis can be counted as one of the most important pioneers of the telephone, a feat all the more impressive considering he acquired all of his knowledge through self-study. Reis was one of the first persons to send a word by an electrical wire. His most productive period as an inventor began about 1858 in a boys' boarding school in Friedrichsdorf. Surprisingly, the inventor received a job as a teacher of French, physics, mathematics, and chemistry. With whatever little time he had left to spare, he spent inside a barn he had converted into a lab. While he had brilliant ideas, they did not achieve what he had hoped for. Inventions such as the velocipede, an early form of the bicycle, or roller skates, the forerunner of today's inline skates, did not find large audiences. Asphalt and concrete were just not that popular back then. The idea of his most important invention, the telephone, was inspired from a physics lesson where he had built a model of the human ear. He carved the external parts of the ear out of wood, and the eardrum he made out of a piece of pig intestine. Having already experimented in his laboratory with electricity and was familiar with Samuel Morse's telegraph, he came to the idea that he could reproduce sound of all kinds by the galvanic current at any distance. From those of you who are not familiar, the sound produced through galvanic current is the result of a natural resonance that is reproduced when an iron rod is placed inside the hollow of an insulated wire with the current being continuously interrupted. His voice transmission was based on the conversation of sound waves into electrical signals with the help of membranes whose vibrations interrupt the circuit. These pulses became then transmitted through a line and then translated back into sound waves through an amplified wooden sound box into a sort of noise that could be identified as speech signals. He presented his invention before the Forum of the Physical Society in Frankfurt am Main on the 26th of October, 1861, under what was the unwieldy title, "On the Reproduction of Musical Sounds to Any Distance Through the Medium of Galvanic Current." He called his device the telephone. During his demonstration, the words that he spoke into the device at one end were clearly reproduced at the other. "The horse does not eat cucumber salad." Rice chose this strange phrase because, well, it makes no sense, so therefore no one could guess what the next word would be. News of the invention spread quickly, and Rice gave demonstrations of this new device to both the Emperor of Austria and the King Max of Bavaria. Rice's phones were shipped for scientific purposes on long trips up to Tbilisi and the Caucasus. But as like his other inventions, his telephone came out just too darn early, and the importance was overlooked. It was simply seen as a plaything for physics. While living long enough to become intensely embittered and resentful, on January 14th, 1874, Philip Reis died of pulmonary tuberculosis in Friedrichsdorf at the age of 40. Alexander Graham Bell had much more luck than Rice. On the 14th of February, 1876, he registered his phone at the US Patent Office. He and his two brothers, while students in Edinburgh, Scotland, had already been experimenting with Rice's apparatus since 1862. They had found several improvements. Apart from the miserable sound quality of Rice's phone that would squeak more than speak, the device would only transmit in one direction. Because of this, it was not really suitable for everyday use. After the early death of his two brothers to tuberculosis, Alexander Graham Bell made further developments to the phone. In 1870, the family moved to Canada, and in addition to his job as a teacher of the deaf, he devoted himself to further development of the phone. Well, since Bell had only his holidays and Sunday evenings to work on his project, he pulled in the engineer Thomas A. Watson to help him out. Bell did not conceal the fact that he had studied the works of Philip Rice, but Rice was not the only source from which he drew his information. The Italian-American Antonio Meucci had filed a patent for a telephone 5 years before, in 1871, but the request was denied because poor Meucci couldn't pay for the processing fee. Bell apparently worked in the former workshops of Meucci, and with Meucci's records and Meucci's own equipment, Bell developed his own phone. During this time, Meucci demanded demanded that he have his plans back, but Bell said that they were lost. Meucci took Bell to court, but as is the case time and time again throughout history, the one without enough money could not stand.
Hear that one? This is what I want you to hear. A lot of people working on this. Bell was able to navigate the patent system, and he had the money to pay a lawyer to get his patents through. And we're going to hear a lot of that. A lot of what happens in technology comes down to law, marketing, and money.
Stand up to the injustices caused by those who did. Meucci died an impoverished man, and it was only after his death that the US authorities issued a fraud case against Bell. But it gets even more interesting and juicy. Only 2 hours after Bell submitted his patent, in came the American physicist Elisha Gray, his closest rival for the rights over the invention. Gray had teamed up with the Western Union Telegraph Company, then the largest cable company in the US. His patent was of a better design than that of Bell's, and over the next few years, about 600 trials were held against Bell's patent, which finally went up before the Supreme Court. But thanks to his stepfather, who represented him as a patent attorney, Bell was allowed to continue to profit from his work. Bell's patent of 1876 will become one of the most profitable property rights of all time. In 1877, he founded the Bell Telephone Company that spawned one of the largest telephone communications.
See, that's another thing that Bell did in a similar way that Edison did. He came up with not just the phone, which he put together from various sources, he came up with the phone company. So if you wanted to use your phone, you had to go through Bell's people. So not just the phone, but the system to use the phone. He got the wires together. So that is, you know, it's not just the invention, it's everything you do with it. And again, his stepfather was an attorney, and he got the stockholders, and he worked in DC, and he started working with the Grosvenor family, and he started a little magazine called National Geographic. So Bell wasn't just an inventor, he was a smart business person.
Companies of our day, AT&T. By the end of the 19th century,
AT&T right there downtown, the Batman building in Nashville. That's there because Alexander Graham Bell, not just the phone, but the phone company.
There were over 230,000 telephone lines connected by over 500,000 miles of wire throughout the United States. When Alexander Graham Bell died on August 1st, 1922, all phone communication in North America was cut off for a minute to honor the man. In 1877, Bell's device made it all the way to Germany. And on the 19th of November, the German postmaster ordered the construction of telegraph wires that would include telephone capabilities. According to a survey by the International Telecommunication Union, the end of 2006 counted nearly 4 billion telephone connections worldwide. Of these, around 2.7 billion were mobile connections. Today, Bell is considered, particularly by those in the US, to be the inventor of the telephone. But the basic fact is that the ideas for his telephone were taken from the works of Antonio Meucci and Johann Philipp Reis. After 140 years, telecommunications has reached a whole new dimension. Our mobile phones are all-around equipment that we use for more than just a phone. We communicate today via Instagram pictures, videos on Vine and YouTube, with likes on Facebook. What do you think the communication device of the future will look like? What will Apple, Samsung, and others be giving us in 20 years from now? Leave us your vision of the future in the comment section below. And if you want to learn more about the inventors who helped bring about sound recording, well then check out our 3-part series right here. And for a look behind the scenes, follow us on Instagram. And if you like our channel, then hey, go ahead and subscribe. All right, well, see you until next.
Thank you, Brett. Anyway, that's, you know, those inventions changed the world. And what did they do for the media? You have obviously more connections, more information, faster communication, and mass media. You had things coming together. You had the high-speed press. You had the telegraph. You have the phone now. You have all of these things going to big media companies, which we'll talk about next time. Hearst and Pulitzer, big newspapers getting powerful because they don't just have newspapers, they have information. And it's really the start of big media. And we'll finish up the 19th century next time with the beginning of major media and the power that it had. And then we'll do a test next week. And I'll have more stuff after that. Anyway, any questions? I appreciate it. I appreciate those of you spending the time showing up. I did midterm grades this morning. Y'all are doing well. Basically, if you just turn in all the assignments and do all the work, you'll at least get a B and most likely an A. So you're doing just fine. Any other stuff going on? You guys have a great day. Stay dry, and I will see you on Thursday. Appreciate it.
Thank you.